When Shaquille O'Neal walked through the front doors of Maison Aurel on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, nobody recognized him. He had dressed the way he always dressed when he wanted to disappear. A plain gray hoodie, dark jeans, white sneakers worn soft at the heel, no jewelry, no security, no entourage, just a man trying to buy a gift. The store was on the corner of Melrose and Norwich, one of those places where the lighting was designed to make you feel slightly underdressed the moment you stepped inside. Glass cases ran the length of both walls, timepieces in one section, leather goods in another. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something floral. A string quartet played softly from a speaker system so discreet you almost convinced yourself it was live. Shaq stood at the entrance for 3 full seconds. Nobody came. He moved to the first display case, hands in his pockets. To his left, a couple in their late 50s were attended to immediately. Menus brought out, chairs offered, water poured. To his right, 2 women in matching blazers stood behind the counter and did not look up. He waited 4 minutes, then 5, then 6. A manager in a charcoal suit walked the length of the floor, made eye contact with him for a fraction of a second, and kept walking. Shaq said nothing. He moved to the next case. It was at that second case that he noticed 3 things, each one small enough to be nothing and specific enough to be everything. First, a child's drawing taped to the inside of the glass case. Not visible from the customer side, only visible because he was tall enough to see over the frame. A crayon house, a sun with 8 rays, a stick figure next to what appeared to be a dog. The tape on the corner had gone brown with age. Second, a coffee mug on the counter behind the display had a name written on masking tape in faded marker. The name read, C. Watkins. The mug was positioned at the far left station, the station that had been empty since he walked in. Third, a woman at the back of the store, older, maybe 65, wearing a rust-colored blazer and reading glasses pushed to the top of her head, watched the whole thing. She did not look away. She pressed her lips together once, the way a person does when they have seen something before and are deciding again what to do about it. Shaq looked at that third thing the longest. Now here is the part that nobody in that store understood yet. The gift he was trying to buy that afternoon was not for himself. He had been trying to buy this particular item, a watch from this particular store, for 2 years and 4 months. Since the morning his mother called him and said, quietly, the way she said important things, "There is something I have been wanting to tell you for a very long time, baby. Come home when you can." What nobody in that store could have guessed was the reason Shaquille O'Neal had walked through these doors specifically. Not any other store, not any other brand, was because of a man named Philip Odell Harrison. And trust me, you are not going to see this ending coming. Stay with us for the whole video, because the way this story finishes is the reason it needed to be told. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972, in Newark, New Jersey, a city that did not make things easy and did not apologize for it. You grew up there knowing the difference between what a neighborhood looked like before something happened and what it looked like after. Shaq was raised in that after. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, stood 5 feet 6 inches and had the kind of quiet in her that people sometimes mistake for softness until they try to press against it. She worked. She prayed. She did not complain about the same problem twice. She fixed it, or she set it down and moved forward. When Shaq was small and asked her once why she never seemed scared, she said something he filed away the way children file things they cannot fully understand yet. "Fear is just excitement that forgot what it was for, baby. Redirect it." His biological father was not in the picture, not in the way that mattered. There was no bitterness in Shaq about this, just a fact. the way a missing step on a staircase is a fact. You learn early where it is, and you step around it. What filled the gap was Philip Harrison. Philip Odell Harrison entered Lucille's life when Shaq was not yet 3. He was a military man, U.S. Army, career soldier, strict in the way that men who have been responsible for other people's lives in dangerous conditions are strict, not cruel, but precise. He had a voice that did not need to rise to be heard, and he used it economically. He adopted Shaq, gave him his discipline, his posture, his work ethic, and one sentence that he said so often, it stopped being a sentence and became something closer to weather, something simply always present in the atmosphere of Shaq's childhood. Don't be a reaction, be a response. He said it when Shaq got in a fight at school. He said it when a coach benched him unfairly. He said it when someone on the street said something designed to provoke. He said it quietly, once, and then he let it sit. Philip Harrison died in November 2013. Prostate cancer, which he had not mentioned to anyone until it was in its final stage, because he was a man who did not complain about the same problem twice. After the funeral, Shaq's mother took him aside. She said, "He had been saving for something. He wanted to give you a watch, a real one, from that place on Melrose, that French place he always liked. He said a man should have something that marks the time properly." She showed Shaq the folded piece of paper Philip had kept in his nightstand drawer. On it, in Philip's handwriting, still, precise, military block letters, was the name of the store, Maison Aurel. Shaq had tried to go twice before. Once the store was closed for renovation. Once it turned into a media moment before he got through the door. He wanted to do it alone. This was a private thing between him and a man who was no longer here to see it finished. The woman who had watched from the back of the store was named Harriet Osei Bonsu. 66 years old, recently retired from 31 years of teaching 9th grade English at Jefferson Preparatory in Pasadena. She had come to pick up a pendant brought in for repair, a small gold cross that had belonged to her mother, the clasp worn thin from 40 years of daily wear. She was the kind of woman who had spent 3 decades teaching 15-year-olds that words had weight, and that choosing the right moment to use them was a skill worth cultivating. She waited. On the far side of the store, a young man named Caleb Watkins had just returned from his lunch break. 24 years old, 8 months into his first real job after 2 years of community college. He had a coffee mug with his name on masking tape because the one the store provided had cracked, and he had not asked for a replacement. Caleb came around the corner and stopped. He recognized the man at the case immediately. He took one breath. He straightened his jacket. He walked over. "Good afternoon, sir. My name is Caleb. Can I help you find something today?" Shaq looked at him. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I think you can." The manager, Renaud Fleury, 4 years running this floor, 17 years in luxury retail, had clocked Caleb's approach. He had grown up in Lyon, come to Los Angeles at 22 with a degree in art history. He had not intended to become the kind of person who walked past people. He thought of himself as someone responsible for a certain standard, a certain atmosphere. He had gone to bed the night before, staring at the water stain on his ceiling in Silver Lake, doing the math the way people do when they are one bad quarter from a conversation they do not want to have. The store's numbers were soft. Corporate had sent 2 emails. He had a review in 11 days. He simply moved his eyes away and kept moving. The second he made that choice, on some level he already knew. Caleb told Shaq, "I know exactly what you're looking for. Give me 1 moment." While he was gone, a teenager named Destiny recognized Shaq and said, at a volume that carried to every corner, "Oh my God, that is Shaquille O'Neal." The 2 women behind the counter looked up. The manager turned. Something moved behind Renaud Fleury's eyes. Not quite shame, and not quite panic, but residing uncomfortably close to both. He began walking toward the case. "You are going to have to wait just a little longer, though," because Caleb Watkins had been warned once, formally, in writing, about what management called unauthorized client engagement, approaching customers without managerial direction. The warning had come 6 months ago. He had not thought of it as a violation. He had thought of it as doing his job. He came back with a watch on a velvet tray, a Longines Heritage Military, a reissue of a 1940s military-issue timepiece, stainless steel, matte dial, luminous hands, nothing that did not need to be there, the kind of watch a man wore when he wanted to carry something functional and serious and built to outlast him. Shaq looked at it for a long time without touching it. "Can I tell you why I'm here?" he said. He told Caleb about Philip Harrison, the man who raised him, the sentence he said every day, the folded piece of paper, the 2 years of trying to get here alone. Caleb listened without interrupting. Then he said, "That's a man who knew what time felt like." Renaud Fleury arrived at the case. He began a smooth managerial rerouting. He got 4 words into it. Shaq turned and looked at him, not with anger, not with the performance of power that someone with 4 championships and a net worth of over $400 million was entitled to perform. Just looked at him, steady. "He's helping me," Shaq said, flat, each word separate. Renaud Fleury stopped. The room was very quiet. Destiny was watching with her phone down for once. Harriet Osei Bonsu had stood up from the chair near the repair counter. Nobody spoke. Now, here is the part that nobody in that store had any way of knowing. Maison Aurel had been founded in 1987 by Gerard Aurel. Before he retired, he had established one practice that continued under every subsequent management: a small, private, discretionary fund for community organizations in Inglewood and Compton. Specifically, youth vocational programs that helped young people get their first footing in professional environments. The program was administered locally by a woman named Constance Watkins, Caleb's mother. She had been running the vocational program connected to Maison Aurel's fund for 9 years. She had never told Caleb. He had gotten his job through the standard application process, his own resume, his own interview. The coffee mug on the counter, C. Watkins, the same name as the woman who had kept the fund running for 9 years. Standing 1 floor below them, in an office connected to the store's foundation records, going over grant reports. In the building the entire time. Caleb had been, without knowing it, the product of his mother's work and the store's investment. The store had been, without knowing it, looking after the family of one of its own people for nearly a decade. And Shaquille O'Neal, who had come here for a dead man's wish, had been the one to make sure nobody interfered with the person who showed him the most basic courtesy on this floor. Renaud Fleury learned all of this 20 minutes later, when Shaq asked to speak to whoever was responsible for the store's community programs. The look on his face when Constance Watkins walked up from downstairs and Caleb's eyes went wide, that look was not quite shame and not quite grace, but it was moving, visibly and in real time, toward something better. Shaq bought the watch. He paid without ceremony, put it in the small navy box Caleb had wrapped with care, and held it in both hands for a moment before he put it in his jacket pocket. He left a check for the vocational fund, enough to cover the next 4 years without interruption. He stopped at the counter where Caleb was standing. "You're going to be good at this," he said. "Whatever you decide this leads to next." He looked at Renaud Fleury, standing near the entrance with the kind of stillness that comes from understanding you have been given more grace than you earned. "You have a good person working for you," Shaq said. "Don't make him invisible." He walked out. Harriet Osei Bonsu watched him go. She pressed her lips together once, not the way she had before. This time it was the expression of someone who had waited to see what would happen and had gotten an answer worth the wait. She picked up her repaired pendant, held the clasp between her fingers to feel that it was solid again, and left. A woman named Constance Watkins learned that the fund she had tended for 9 years would continue for 4 more. A young man named Caleb learned that his mother had been building something beneath him his whole time at this job, and that the floor he stood on was more solid than he knew. A manager named Renaud Fleury learned what it costs to move your eyes away from a man and keep walking, and what it looks like when someone chooses not to make you pay for it. A retired teacher named Harriet Osei Bonsu learned, again, what she had already learned in 31 years of standing in front of 15-year-olds, that the moment worth waiting for always comes, if you have the patience to stay in the room. And Shaquille O'Neal walked to his car with a watch in a navy box in his jacket pocket and said out loud to no one, "Don't be a reaction, be a response." Philip Harrison had been right. He had always been right. He never stopped marking the time, and neither should you. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and tell us if you've ever had someone in your life with a rule they said so often it became part of the air you breathed. If this story hit you, hit the like button. Not because we asked, but because Philip Harrison deserved to be remembered by more people than he ever knew. Subscribe and join this community, because we tell these stories the way they deserve to be told, with every detail, every person, every layer intact. The next video is already waiting for you. We will see you there. Paste your script,